Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Elena Skyhawk. And today I'm sharing a story I've really never told publicly. And it's the moment I discovered I could see spirits of the dead. It happened the day shortly after my grandma passed away. And let's just say she wasn't about to let a little thing like death stop her from showing up. This experience became a turning point in my life as a shaman and as a metaphysical minister. If you've ever wondered how mediumship activations happen, whether suddenly or through lineage, I think this story will speak to you. So let's begin. Just take a deep breath with me and settle in, because it is a pretty funny story. So today I want to share with you the very first time I realized I could see spirits, like really see them as plainly as you're sitting watching this. It began with a phone call, the one telling me that my grandma had died. Now, she died in January. And she lived in Michigan, which is very cold that time of year. Wasn't quite so cold where I lived because I was living in Las Vegas at the time. But she was my mom's mom and my favorite grandma, the one that I was the closest to and kind of turned to a lot growing up for protection. But just like when my dad's mom passed away a few years before that, they said, my parents were like, yeah, don't bother coming back for the funeral. Come back, during a happier time. Well, I fell for it once. I wasn't going to fall for it a second time. So I did what any respectful granddaughter would do. I called my aunt and I said, Mom won't let me come back for Grandma's funeral, and I want to be there. I want somebody to pick me up at the airport. Can you and Uncle Ken come and pick me up? She was like, sure, you can actually even stay with us. And I was like, cool. So I made my flight plans. Well, in the meantime, Uncle Ken called his sister, who was my mom, and said they were picking me up at the airport and I was going to be staying with them for the funeral. Well, my parents weren't going to have that happen. And it wasn't until 2017 when I realized why, because when my uncle passed away and I got to talk to my aunt, found out that they knew a lot of what was going on with us kids and the abuse we were going through, but they didn't know all of it. And so my parents didn't want us staying anywhere with anybody where we might either spill the beans about what was going on or be told stuff they didn't want us to know. So my mom immediately called me. We're picking you up at the airport. What's the flight number? Where is it coming into? Blah, blah, blah. We will be there to greet you. Now, mind you, this was before cell phones. So I flew into Chicago, Midway Airport, snowing like crazy, frigid out. The planes they were having such a hard time de-icing the planes because as soon as they got the ice off, it was right back on. So it took a while. And then, of course, the puddle jumper we had to take over Lake Michigan was having trouble. They were having trouble keeping the ice off the wings on that as well. Then they finally got on board. There was like 6 of us passengers. I think they'd only had room for 8, but there was, I think, 6 people on board. And it was one of the bumpiest rides over the lake I have ever experienced. And I love to fly. So needless to say, I was late getting into the Flint airport in Michigan. My parents weren't anywhere to be found. And like I said earlier, there were no cell phones back then. So it was like I had no one to call. I didn't know where they were. I didn't know if they were on their way, if they forgot, what. About 15 minutes later, they showed up and they were harried. They were frustrated. You could see it just energy, Turns out they had a flat tire on the way to pick me up. And so my dad had to get out in the freezing cold to change the tire. So he was not happy. We made it back to the motel they were staying in so we could both freshen up, put my luggage down, and then we headed over to the funeral home. Now, mind you, back then, because this was back in the 90s, so the whole family pretty much was still alive back then. I walked into the room where the family had gathered for the viewing. Wall-to-wall people. I mean, it was packed. My grandma lived until she was like 93. She knew a lot of people. She was very popular everywhere she went. People just loved her, and she was an Avon lady. So when I walked in, I couldn't see where the casket was. So I asked my mom, where's grandma? And the relatives that were standing around us kind of parted ways. And then I could see where the casket was. And that's when it happened. Total shock, because there was my grandma sitting up in her casket, going like this, yelling at me. Her words were, "You're late. Where have you been?" And I was just like, huh? And my mom was standing right next to me. So I was doing this. They're like, Mom. And I thought I was being quiet about it. I said, I thought you said grandma was dead. She's like, she is. What are you talking about? Shush. And I'm like, if she's dead, why is she sitting up in her casket yelling at me for being late? You could hear a pin drop in the room. Everybody shut up. And of course, they all turn around to look at me. Because you see, up until that point, I knew I had gifts. I knew I could heal people. I knew things that I should have never known, even not since I was a child. But I thought everybody could do that. I thought everybody knew things that they shouldn't have known. But I didn't know I could see dead people. I did not know I could see spirits. So sometimes mediumship just pops in when you least expect it. Now, the fun thing with that, once I got over the shock that grandma was sitting up in her casket yelling at me, it actually turned into kind of a fun thing, because anytime she had any messages for me afterwards, and this was even once I left Vegas and moved to Arizona, she would show up by my bed in the middle of the night with information. And she always came with her casket. And then one night during our shamanic classes, Halloween happened to fall on a Tuesday, which is when our classes were. And Serge decided it's a good night to go. Let's go to the underworld and see what kind of ghouls and goblins we can stir up and go on a journey. Now, normally when we did journeys or we did any kind of work, he would always start to the right of him and go around the room and then end up with me being the last person to talk, since I was his apprentice. But that night he turned around, looked at me, and he goes, okay, we're starting with you first. And I'm like, why me? He goes, because I have a feeling grandma showed up with her casket. And I'm like, how did you know? Because she did. And he goes, because as soon as she showed up, you two were giggling and laughing the whole time as you went zooming around the underworld in her casket. And I was like, cool. It was kind of like, it was a lot of fun. And then I knew it was time for Grandma to go when she showed up in my townhouse one morning or one night. And she was just standing by my bed and there was no casket. And I haven't seen her since. But this story kind of shows that sometimes we don't go looking to be a medium. We don't expect it. It finds us when we are ready to handle the energy. And then it finds us and it works through us to do the work that we agreed to do when we came down onto planet Earth this time. And I'll be back later for more stories. Some of them are funny, very poignant, but it kind of shows the trajectory of what happened and how I got to be where I am today with my healing journey, what I teach, why I'm so passionate about what I do, and why I try to help as many, not just humans, but animals or any living being. And we'll have a talk about with a tree coming up as well. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this little story about Grandma, and know that if you happen to see spirits, say thank you.